Masechet Ketubot Daf Hey. Today we're going to focus on the prohibition of having first bi'ah on Friday night or on Saturday night. I will talk about other nights also, why it's best for an almanah to be on Thursday night. And in the middle, we will have some fascinating agadah. So we begin Amar Mod, we're quoting the Braita that we cited yesterday, that ended saying, Ben kach u ben kach lo yib'ol, lo be'erev Shabbat, v'lo b'mosei Shabbat. Because no matter what, the first bi'ah should not be on Friday night or on Saturday night. Now we understand, Bishlam be'erev Shabbat mishum habura. The problem with Friday night is that is in fact Shabbat, and the first bi'ah, she is a betula, she will bleed, and one is causing a wound. And this is a problem of tolada, of shochet, or the Gemara later is going to analyze this in further depth. But the problem is it is in fact on Shabbat and causing an injury of some sort. Ela b'mosei Shabbat amai lo, but on Saturday night, what's the problem? What's wrong? Saturday night is not Shabbat, so what's the problem here? Amar bizera mishum heshbonot. Oh, the problem is making calculations. The idea here is that the wedding celebration is also on Saturday night. So therefore, if they did the wedding, let's say beforehand during the week, after all, they're supposed to do it on Wednesday. And the first bi'ah should have been on Wednesday night. But for whatever reason, let's say they did not consummate their marriage then, and now it's Saturday night. In that case, this seems that this would not be a problem because they're not making any celebration. There is a Tosafot that says that they may have been accustomed to actually make a celebration for the first bi'ah. Seems quite interesting. But in any case, it would if you don't say that, then we're not talking about that case, but rather we're talking about a case where the actual wedding celebration is on Saturday night, and in that case, on Shabbat, one's going to make calculations. How many people are coming? How many guests? There's 200 guests coming. How much food do we need? How many waiters do we need? How much drinks? And all that. And so therefore, since making calculations on Shabbat is a problem, because then you're going to come to write it down, that's why we do not permit the first bi'ah on Saturday night, meaning when the wedding celebration is also going to be on Saturday night, or some kind of celebration surrounding that first bi'ah. Okay, so that's the first answer of the Bizera, but we're going to reject it. And he's going to offer a second one. Calculations that have to do with a mitzvah, are those prohibited on Shabbat? Both said. You are allowed to make calculations that are for a good purpose, that help fulfill a commandment. You can do them even on Shabbat. Of course, not with writing them down, but you can do them in your head, and it's permitted. Here's a few examples. You can allocate charity funds to the poor on Shabbat, and you say, this person, he needs some meals. This person needs this much money. Again, we don't write it down. We don't give them the money on Shabbat, but we can make the calculation of the total budget and what we're going to give each person. This is also why, nowadays you can get an aliyah and you can make a donation. We can make fundraising drives on Shabbat for charities, for tzedakah. V'amar Rabbi Yaakov, amar Rabbi Yochanan, holchin lebetei knesiot ulbetei midrashot lefakach al iskei rabim beShabbat. Furthermore, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, who said that one can go to Bet Knesset and to Bet Midrash. Obviously, you go there for Shabbat, for prayer and for study. But not only that, also, if there's some communal need that needs to be discussed, one can go there and have a meeting for the communal need, even if it will involve we need to build something. What's the money that it will involve? If it's for the need of the community, that's permitted to discuss that on Shabbat. V'amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi amar Rabbi Yochanan mefakechin pikuach nefesh b'Shabbat. Also, one is allowed to supervise matters of saving life on Shabbat. If you have to raise money to save someone who is captured or who needs surgery and you have to raise money, that is permitted. It's kind of like, of course you can. This would be pikuach nefesh. There are some manuscripts that say pikuach rabim. So that would be more expansive, although we already said iskei rabim. It's about half the manuscript, so it's not clear which one's correct. But it would seem to include both, no matter how you read it. ואמר רב שמואל בר נחמני אמר רבי יונתן הולכין לתרתיעות ולקרקעות לפקח על עסקי רבים בשבת. This is a fascinating line that says one is allowed to go to theaters and circuses. It's talking about Greco-Roman, that this is Roman times, but the Romans got these things also from the Greeks that had them. So theaters and circuses, theaters where usually they'd put on plays of different sorts, and circuses where they would also put on shows or have perhaps even gladiator fights or other sporting events. One is allowed to go to these places even on Shabbat in order to supervise matters that have to do with the public. So we know about this not only from Talmudic sources but also from Roman sources, that oftentimes the emperor or the governor, the Roman governor, would come and he would attend these events. He would attend the plays or attend the sporting events. And it was important while he was there, the people often used the opportunity to rally and to ask for lower taxes or whatever the issue of the day was. And so if the Jewish people needed something that was important for the welfare of the community, then they had to go and be there on Shabbat, even though otherwise it wouldn't be appropriate. There's a question whether it's appropriate to go to these places even during the weekday. A lot of times there was, the opening ceremony would be idolatry, like for the Olympics. And also gladiatorial fights would involve a lot of violence and murder that you're paying for to enter. But it seems that there were a lot of Jews that went during the week anyway, and the rabbis tried to give some merit to why it might be a good thing to go. For example, if it's a Jewish gladiator who dies, that way they could testify that the guy died. His wife could get remarried. But anyway, this is for a different matter. This is for going as to the part of it that's going to be a rally that will, or some discussion that will be about communal things. One is permitted to do that on Shabbat. One can do matchmaking on Shabbat. Even though the shidduch will be arrangements, what are you going to pay for? What am I going to pay for? All this is for a mitzvah, so that the children will be able to get married. Tinok doesn't mean a baby. It means, it can also mean a young person. And also, even on Shabbat, you can arrange for a tutor to come to teach his child Torah or teach him a craft. And so you can say, listen, can you come on Tuesday and teach him? Because this is also a mitzvah. A father is responsible not only for teaching Torah, but also for teaching a trade to his son. So all these, of course, all this was without violating any deoraita in any of these cases. Not like we can, travel to the or carry something to the circus or anything like that, but just in terms of the prohibition of making calculations, which normally is prohibited because of v'daber dabad, you can't think about business matters, and also you may come to write if you actually perform business on Shabbat, but for these purposes, these are good causes. It is permitted, and so therefore, why do we quote all this? Coming back to our idea, if one would make a wedding and permit if one would permit first bi'ah on Shabbat on Saturday night, along with the celebration that would accompany that, a wedding celebration, then what are you afraid of? That on Shabbat itself, you're going to be thinking about the calculations of how much food you're going to need and how much you have to buy and how much it's going to cost. That's okay. A wedding is a mitzvah, so it's permitted to do that on Shabbat. So that's not the problem. Okay, so second answer. Ela, amar bi zera. Gezerah shema yishhot ben off. The problem is that you may slaughter a young bird. Why a young bird? I mean, you might slaughter an animal or a big bird also, but that's less likely because to bring an animal or a big bird, it takes a lot of work. And by the time you do all that, you can say, wait, it's Shabbat. I'm not allowed to do this, right? Someone will stop you. But if it's a young bird, it's very easy. It's very soft, very weak. You could just take it in 10 seconds. You take a knife and do shechita, and then you'll only then realize, oh no, it's Shabbat, but you're so anxious because you have to make a big meal on Saturday night, so you might come to violate Shabbat by killing this chick. All right. Amar le Abaye, ele b'atem kippurim shachal liot b'sheni b'Shabbat, yidache gezerah shema yishchot ben off. Abaye challenges it b'zerah. Says if you're going to worry about every time that there may be a big meal that is necessary after Shabbat, then is always going to be a problem. For example, if Yom Kippur is on Monday, meaning Sunday night, so that means there's a mitzvah to already eat all day on Sunday, right? You have to eat a lot. And so if Yom Kippur would fall out on Monday, maybe we should push it off. Now, obviously, you can't push off Yom Kippur. It's Yud Tishrei. You can't make a Yud Aleph. But what we can do is adjust the calendar so that Rosh Hashanah will be an extra, Elul will be an extra day. We could push off Rosh Hashanah and thereby push off Yom Kippur. So we can arrange the calendar so that Yom Kippur will never fall out. It can never fall out on Sunday because you can't have Shabbat and Yom Kippur back to back because there's no time to prepare a meal before Yom Kippur. But even if it's that can't be on Sunday. But even on Monday, maybe you'll say we should prohibit it because maybe on Shabbat you're going to be saying, oh, I have to make a big meal to prepare for the fast. And then you're going to also come to kill a young bird on Shabbat because you're preparing for Yom Kippur on Sunday night. And we answer, no, it's not the same. In that case, one is only preparing food for oneself or your own family. It's only a few people. So you're not as anxious because you know there'll be enough time on Saturday night and on Sunday to prepare the meal. Whereas with the wedding celebration, you're preparing food for lots of friends and family, dozens of people. And there, you're very anxious to have time to prepare everything. And there, we're more worried that you may come to preempt and start preparing on Shabbat itself. Also, there's another difference in how much time there is. If you're making a wedding on Saturday night, then you only have a couple of hours to prepare from the time Shabbat is over until the guests are going to start arriving. Whereas if for Yom Kippur, you have the whole night and the morning, and that's okay. You just have to have the meal ready in time for the afternoon of Sunday afternoon when you're going to make the fast. Okay, so therefore Abaye's challenges are answered. All right, Ashta da'ated le'achi erev Shabbat nameh gezer Hashem yishchot ben od. Now we note that once we have this reason that we're worried that we may actually kill a young bird on Shabbat itself to prepare for the celebration, that reasoning would also apply to Erev Shabbat. If Erev Shabbat was scheduled to be the first Bi'ah, meaning, let's say, the wedding would be on Friday. And so now the celebration, they're going to combine Friday night meal with a wedding celebration, and now we see the guests. Oh, there's a lot of guests coming. They're eating a lot, so you may come to take a young bird and do shechita on Shabbat, and that itself would be a good reason not to make a wedding on Friday and the first bi'ah on Friday night. We already had the reason of chabura, but actually we're going to see at the end of this daf that there's a lot of questions about is this chabura, is this really prohibited or permitted? Depends on a lot of conditions, and so this would be an additional reason why bi'ah would be problematic on Friday night. All right, now we have a question. What's exact timing here? If we have a wedding on Wednesday, we have to assume that weddings, ceremonies and celebrations would be during the day, because at night it's dark and they didn't have lights. So that would be very expensive to have to light something up with lots of lamps. So the wedding celebration and the ceremony and celebration is going to be Wednesday during the day or the afternoon. And then if you do bi'ah also on Wednesday afternoon after the wedding while it's still light out. And there's a problem of bi'ah while it's light out, but it could be in a room and you close the shades. It's okay. So is that permitted? And according to that, we do not worry that the husband's mind will cool down. Meaning, if they have the first bi'ah and he doesn't find blood, no dam betulim, and so now he's upset right away. He's upset. What's going on? I paid 200. I promised you 200 zuz. I thought you were a betula. Now you're not. He's ready, all zealous. He wants to go to take her to court. And we want him to go to court because we want the court to resolve it. Here's the problem. If it's too early during the day on Wednesday, the court's not open yet till all the way on Thursday morning. So by that time, he may cool down and say, you know what, forget about it. I don't care. But this is a problem. We want him to care because maybe she was unfaithful in the meantime, since the Kiddushin until now, and maybe they can't be together. So according to this, we don't worry that he's going to cool down, right? It's only a few more hours, and so it's permitted. Or the other side, he said, yes, you make the wedding on Wednesday during the afternoon, during the day or afternoon, but then you should wait till nighttime, Wednesday night, which is Yom Hamishi, in order to do the bi'ah. Why? Because we do worry that if you wait too long, he will cool down. And so therefore, if they have bi'ah sometime during the night, and he finds that there's no dam, then he'll be really upset and he'll come to court first thing on Thursday morning, which is only a little bit after. And so we'd rather he delay the bi'ah till the night so that he will not have time to cool down. That's the question. And we have an answer. Tashema detane bar kapara. Remember bar kapara? He is he's between the Tanaim and Amoraim, Dor HaMa'avar, a transition Tana Amora. He lived and taught in Kesaria. And he's going to be important because we're going to see a whole bunch of agadot by him. So he says, Betulan, he said, in fact, you make the wedding on Wednesday, and then the first bi'ah should be on Wednesday night, Yom Hamishi. But here's the thing, he doesn't say the reason is because he may cool down. He gives a different reason altogether, because during the 6 days of creation, on Yom Hamishi, is when the birds and fish were created. And it says, Vaybarech otam, and Hashem says, Puru urvu. Milu etayam, and so the special beracha of be fruitful, multiply is on Thursday, and therefore we want them to have the first be on Thursday, so that they should be v'yidgu ladov, so that they should be like the fish and have many children. So that's the reason. Okay, that's a very nice agadah, that Haggadah / halacha that Bar Kapara said. Now, Amanani said, and Bar Kapara further taught that an almana, someone who's already married, she's a widow, she should get married on Thursday during the day, and the bi'ah should be Thursday night, which is Yom Shishi, because Yom Shishi is when mankind, animals too, but even more importantly, human beings were also blessed, and says, Peru Urvu. Good. So both of those nights are good, and therefore Wednesday during the day not the best time for bi'ah. Now we note Tama mishum beracha mishum ikredata lachai shinan. The reason Bar Kapara gives is because you want to get the beracha of the fish, so that's why better to be on Wednesday night and not during the day. But otherwise he wouldn't be concerned with the cooling off period. So this is not we don't worry about the cooling off. So ironically, even though the source says you should have the first bi'ah at Wednesday night, Yom Hamishi, because it gives a different reason to prove that we don't worry about cooling off because of those few extra hours. Now we ask, if, according to your reasoning here, that the blessing of fish is so wonderful, how come we don't say an almana also should have the first bi'ah on Wednesday night, on Yom Hamishi, or during the day, on whatever, it doesn't matter, anytime on Yom Hamishi, when there is the blessing of fish. And the answer is, the blessing for human beings is better, right? Which would you rather? Hashem's blessing, Pru. By the way, this is, you notice that this the blessing, the Pru is understood here as a blessing, not as a commandment. So what wouldn't you rather? The blessing for human beings rather than to be fruitful like a fish. So that's why better for almana to be Thursday night or Friday, Yom Shishi. Okay, another reason for almana for being first bi'ah being on Yom Shishi and Thursday night is because the rabbis were diligent in making sure that the husband would be with his widow wife for at least 3 days. For Betula, he has to be with her and not go to work for 7 days. But for Almanah, that's not the case. So the rabbis wanted to make sure, diligent, that this would happen. Detanya. So the rabbi said, how come you make the wedding on Thursday during the day, and then the bi'ah will be on Thursday night, Friday, Yom Shishi? Because if you would say that they should have bi'ah on any time on Yom Hamishi, then the machal mashkim l'matov holech lo. Let's say Wednesday night is Yom Hamishi, and then in the morning on Thursday, he'll be like, okay, I did my duty, and now I'm going to go to work. And he's not going to stay with his wife, his new bride. So, a second marriage is not as exciting, so he's just going to go to work. So but the rabbi said, no, even though it's a second marriage, still you have to pay her exclusive attention for at least 3 days. And so they were worried about the daughters of Israel. She has sameach at least 3 days. Hamishi b'Shabbat, ve'erev Shabbat v'Shabbat. So that if they have the wedding on Thursday during the day, so he's not going to work, he's with her all day on Wednesday, and then since he's doing Friday night, sometime on Thursday night rather, or sometime on Friday, and Friday anyway is a short day of work, and you have to prepare for Shabbat, so most people aren't working on Friday Erev Shabbat, so then he's not going to go to work then, and Shabbat he's not going to work, so you have 3 days, and then Sunday he'll go back to work, but at least we got 3 days in. So there's really 2 reasons why Mana should do the bi'ah on Thursday night on Yom Shishi. What you see in this Talmud is probably originally, as we saw before, this is probably a very old halacha of Betula as on Yom Revi'i, Almana Yom Chamishi, and there are multiple reasons that are eventually given over the course of centuries to explain this old halacha. What we see here is that both of these reasons are coming together, and so that's why the Gemara is trying to resolve the tension between them, or rather just say it could be this or it could be that also. So there are multiple reasons for these old customs. Okay, ma'ika ben beracha leshakedu. What would be a practical difference between these 2 reasons for an almana to be on Yom Hamishi? Whether it's because of the blessing or because we want to make sure that he doesn't go to work. Let's say you have someone who's unemployed. He's retired. So in that case, he's not going to go to work anyway. So he can make the wedding and have the bi'ah any day of the week. Don't worry. He's gonna be with his wife and stay with her every day, all year long. And so for him, the only the beracha reason would apply, and still would. So he still should get to have the bi'ah on Yom Hamishi. Or rather, get married on Yom Chamishi, and then Bi'ah would be on Yom Shishi. Yom Tov shechal liot be'erev Shabbat, or another similar case that would apply to everyone is if you have Yom Tov on Yom Shishi on Friday, which means it starts Thursday night. So already Thursday, everyone is preparing for the holiday. They're not going to work on Thursday. And so in that case, since you're not going to work anyway on Thursday, you could have the Bi'ah on Wednesday, and you still have 3 days of not going to work, Thursday, Friday, Shabbat. And so that would be a case where if it was only because of not going to work, you could make it a day earlier. But if it's because of the beracha, then you still want to make sure that it will be on Yom Shishi in order to receive that beracha. All right, Darash Bar Kapara. Now that we mentioned Bar Kapara, we're going to mention a couple of other derashot, very beautiful derashot that he said. An astounding statement that the works of righteous people are greater than Hashem's works in creating the heavens and the earth. Right? A tzadik's work is better, more impressive, Why does he say that? Dilu b'maaseh shamayim v'aretz ketib af yadi yaseda eretz v'mini tipecha shamayim. Here in Yeshaya says, my hand, singular. Hashem's one hand made the foundation of the earth, and his right hand, only his right hand, made the heavens. So you see, God made the earth and the heavens only with one hand, meaning easy to do. Regarding the works of righteous people, it says, Machon, the place that you have made for yourself to dwell in, Hashem, the sanctuary, konenu yadecha, your hands have established. Now this is a bit of a difficult reading because the Peshat is that we're still talking about Hashem's creation, where this is in Az Yashir, we're addressing Hashem and saying, what a great thing that you made a holy place, meaning the land of Israel. But nevertheless, it does talk about the Mikdash. So Mikdash, not just holy place, but the Bet HaMikdash, which is created by human beings. And so the word Ziyadecha here, Bar Kapara, takes to refer to the Sadiqim who build the Bet HaMikdash and other good things that they do in the world. And here it does two hands, which means it is a more impressive work. This Dirasha reminds me of what Rabbi Sachs said to Tony Blair when he asked him, what about the boring bits, meaning the whole chapter after chapter about building the Mishkan. And Rabbi Sachs notes that when Hashem creates a home for human beings, it's all said in only one chapter, Genesis 1. But for man to create a home for God to dwell in this world, there you need dozens of chapters because that's so much more impressive. So that's a similar idea here to what Bar Kapara says. Okay, Heshi Bavli Ehad, behind this Dirasha also might be a kind of interesting play on man's works and God's works, that the acts that the righteous do are, in a way, they are agents or messengers of God's acts. And so, therefore, the ambiguity of the pasuk, that what it says, Hashem, you create these things that you did, and Bar Kapara is taking them as what the righteous do, right? The righteous are kind of extensions of God's will in the world. And I think you see that in the next Dirasha also. So a certain Babylonian who was a Bichaya, an early Amorah that originally came from Bavel, and then moved to Eretz Yisrael. And he notes that in Tehillim, it says, the land, his hands, Yadav, plural, Yasaru, created. So what do you mean by Kapara, that Hashem used only one hand? Here it says, both hands Hashem made to create the earth. And Bar Kapara can answer, Yado Ketib, even though we pronounce it Yadav, but it's written Yod Dalid Vav Haser, and so since it's written that way, it could be read also Yado, which is singular. In our Tanakh, we actually spell it Maleh, Yod Dalid Yod Vav, not like the Talmud, but there are a number of discrepancies between the spellings noted in the Talmud and the spellings in the Masoretic text. But that's a different topic. Okay, V'haketib Yasaru, hold on. Okay, you can't possibly read it Yado, because the verb is a plural verb. Then it's not Yasar, but Yasaru. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Yaseru es be'otav. Now the plural of created could be going on fingers. One hand has a lot of fingers. So your one hand created in plural because of your fingers that did a lot of all these actions. As it says in Tehillim 8, when we're looking up at heaven and I see your heavens, the works of your fingers. The idea of the poetry in Tehillim is that it's so very fine. The moon and stars, everything is so perfectly painted, like with great care. And a fine brush, that not just hands but even fingers. So there is you see that figure of speech of God's fingers, which would be plural even if only one hand. Okay, Me'tibeh. Another challenge to Bar Kapara. How could you say God made everything with one hand if here he says The heavens declare the glory of God, and the works of his hands, Yadav plural, Magid Harakia, the firmament proclaims. The pashat of it is that when we look up at the heavens, right, they proclaim God's great works because we see them and we say, wow, this is so amazing. And we turn to praise Hashem for all the works of creation. So anyway, it says plural hands. Hachikamar, we explain, Maseh Yadayim shel tzadikim mi magid harakia umaynihu matar. Actually, Maseh Yadav is not referring to Hashem's works, but the actions that tzadikim do. So Maseh Yadav, Magid, who will express the greatness of the works of righteous people's hands. It is a rakia whether it rains or not. When righteous people do a good job and do mitzvot and take care of everything, then the rain falls, as it says in Shema. And so therefore, the rakia is actually reflecting on and praising the works of human beings. So I think this continues that theme that I mentioned before, that there's Bar Kapara is, and the Gemara here is noting an ambiguity between the works of God and the works of man, that they can be described in similar ways as tzaddikim are kind of an agent for God. Okay, Darash Bar Kapara. Another Darasha Bar Kapara said, "Mai dichti v'yated tiye lecha al azenecha." Pasuk in Devarim that says there should be a peg or a shovel among your tools. When you go out to war, you should make sure to have a little spade or a little shovel, so that when the soldiers, when the travelers have to relieve themselves, they will cover up their se'ah, their excrement, because God's encampment is holy, and so part of being holy is to be clean, and so among your other tools, make sure to have a spade. Of course, that's the peshat, but Bar Kapara says, we can reread it another way. Instead of azenecha, meaning your weapons, you can say oznecha, meaning your ears. If a person sees that someone is saying something that's inappropriate, and he's going to have to hear something that is inappropriate, like lashon hara or bad words, whatever, he has a yated. Yated here means not a peg, but rather his finger, which is also called yated. Your finger should always be in your ear, or ready to put in your ear, so that you can make sure not to hear the negative things that a person is saying. Rambam quotes this as an example of a derasha that the rabbis make that they know very well is not the peshat, but they're using it as a hook, as an asmachta, so you remember it better. Even though even Bar Kapara knows how to read the pasuk correctly. Okay, v'hainu damar Rabbi Elazar mipnei ma'asbiotav shel adam domot li tedot, and so Rabbi Elazar also said something similar. He says, how come a person's fingers are like pegs? Now we interrupt to say, what do you mean? Why are our fingers like pegs? Mai ta'ama lema mishum dim halekan. What exactly is he asking? Is he asking how come they're like pegs, that we have separate fingers and not like webbed hands, like reptiles? Is that what he's asking? Well, we know an answer why we need separate fingers. There are halachic reasons for it. Each and every finger has a halachic purpose. When it comes to the pinky, you need a zeret is a certain measurement that goes from the edge of the thumb to the edge of the pinky. That's a zeret. That's half an amma. So it's a good thing we have a pinky, otherwise we wouldn't be able to measure a zeret. Zo kemisa, the fourth finger, is used to do kemisa when the kohen has to take a fistful of mincha, of flour. He uses the three middle fingers, and so this is you need the fourth finger to take the proper amount of flour. Zo amma, the middle finger is necessary to measure an amma, which goes from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger, which because it's the tallest. So if you didn't have the middle finger, then you wouldn't measure precisely. Zo etzba, we need the first finger because that's called etzba, and that's used to sprinkle blood on in various offerings. The Kohen has to sprinkle the blood. He uses his first finger. And Zog Gudal, and the thumb is used because in certain purification rituals, blood is put on, like a mesorah, blood is put on his right thumb. And so we need all of these, all of our fingers for halachic purposes. This really sounds like halachic man, literally. Right? It doesn't say that we need a thumb so that we can hold things, grab a screwdriver and a hammer. Right? That's besides the point. We need them for halachic reasons. So if that's what Rabbi Elazar was asking, then we have a reason why we need separate fingers. Rather, he meant something else. The question was, how come our fingers are pointed like pegs? How come they're wider at the bottom and thinner at the top? It's for this reason, so that if you hear something negative, something improper, you can put your finger in your ear and it'll fit in nicely and block out the bad sounds that one will hear. Or another Agadah on the same theme. How come the entire ear is hard? It's kind of hard. It's not very hard, but it's stiff cartilage. But one part of it, the earlobe, is very soft. So if you're hearing something inappropriate, you can take your earlobe and bend it into your ear and block out the sound. Brilliant. And now a warning, make sure not to allow your ears to hear idle things, not only negative things, even idle talk, because when a person is punished in the fires, the first thing that burns, most easily burned, are the ears. So make sure that your ears don't sin by hearing nonsense. Okay, end of the Agadah, and now we get to a last question that we're going to ask. It's a complex, long question, but the answer is only going to come on the next daf. Is one permitted to do bi'ah first time on Shabbat for a betula? Now, this is a strange question because we already saw there's a braita. It's in the Tosefta that says it's not allowed. So we know the answer is not allowed. Why are we asking? It seems that the questioner here perhaps didn't know that braita. Not everybody knew every braita. We see that in general. Or maybe it just wants to know, it knows it's prohibited, but wants to pinpoint precisely why it's prohibited, and also is it true in every case or some cases? So we want to analyze the halachic foundation for this prohibition. Okay, so here's a few possibilities. Dam mifkad pekid or chabure mihabar. Regarding the blood that's of the hymenal blood, dam betulim, how exactly does it work biologically? Is it mifkad? Is it pooled up? Is it all in one area? In other words, thinking of the hymen kind of like there's blood stored there. Not that the blood flows through, but this blood stored there, and therefore it's kind of got like a little pouch. And therefore, it would just be opening up a pouch, which would be permitted on Shabbat. Or is it like regular blood that's flowing, and then when one opens it, it's like making a wound, and that would be prohibited on Shabbat. So that's question number one. Now this is going to split into two forks. Either way, if we say like a pool, or it's attached and therefore it's a wound. So now here's one side. If it's pulled up like in a pouch, now what's his goal? The person who's doing bi'ah, the husband who's doing bi'ah for the first time with his wife, does he want to get that blood out? The blood has good use for him because he wants to use it as proof. See, she's a betula, he's happy, and he wants to get that blood. And this would be permitted. Similar to if you wanted, sorry for the analogy, but, like in Israel, they sell milk in bags, or shoko, that a chocolate milk in a little pouch. So you're allowed to open that on Shabbat, because even though you're making a hole in the pouch, you want the chocolate milk. So that's permitted. So that's one side. Or maybe when he's doing bi'ah, what he actually wants is a passageway. He wants it to make it easier for bi'ah in the future. And in that case, it would be prohibited because either he's building or makebe patish, finishing off a vessel. And so he's doing this constructive purpose, which is a melacha, and in that case, it would be prohibited. And even if the first one that you say, he just wants to extract the blood, he wants the blood itself as a good proof that she was a betula, and the fact that he's making a passageway is a positive, but that's not his primary intention. And so if so, still we have a question within that. Halakha Rabbi Shimon damar davar shemitkaven mutar. Rabbi Shimon in general, all of Chot Shabbat, he is more lenient, and he said, if I do an action and the melacha, my primary intention is not to do the melacha, but rather I have some other intention, like if I'm dragging a chair across soft ground, my intention is to get the chair from here to there, and I don't care about the furrow, even though I'm making a furrow. It's because it's not my primary intention. So do we follow him as halacha? In that case, it would be permitted, since my primary intention is because I want that blood to come out. I want the blood. And the secondary intention is to make a passageway, but that's called not intentional. If it's only secondary intention, is permitted. Or do we follow Rabbi Yehuda, who says that something, even if it's not my primary intention, it still is prohibited. If I'm doing something that is in effect is going to affect a melacha, even if that's not my primary intention, it's still forbidden. In this case, it would be forbidden. And even if we say halacha like Yehuda and something that's not my primary intention is still forbidden, so we're making this passageway. Is that a destructive act? And on Shabbat, generally, if it's a destructive act, then it's not chayav. And so, why would it be a destructive act? Because a betula is worth more than a be'olah. Betula gets 200 if she would get married again. Be'olah only 100. And so this is detracting from her, and so it's destroying. Or do you call this mitaken? It's constructive because the husband wants there to be a passageway, so for the future bi'ot, and so this is now making it more easy for future bi'ot, and therefore it's constructive and therefore prohibited. Okay, that's all one side. Now going back to the original pool question, so another whole version of this chain of questions. If you say that the blood, in fact, flows regularly, it's not a pouch, and therefore that bi'ah is making a wound. So now within that, if he wants the blood itself, that's prohibited. He's making a wound and wants the blood, no good. Or maybe his intention is because it's pleasurable. He wants to have a pleasurable experience with the bi'ah, and the fact that he's making a wound is a side point. That's not his primary intention, and therefore it's permitted. And even if you say within that's for his own pleasure, and that the blood is by the way, that's a secondary thing. Halakha Rabbi Yehuda, halakha Rabbi Shimon. So we follow Rabbi Yehuda that says a secondary intention is still prohibited, or maybe halakha is like Rabbi Shimon who says a secondary intention is permitted. And if you say halakha is like Rabbi Yehuda that says it's prohibited, even though it's a secondary intention, nevertheless, even the secondary intention that is destructive, because now he's taking a betula, was worth more, now be'olah, and so it's mikalkel, it's destructive and therefore permitted. Or do you say that this is constructive because he wants there to be a nice passageway for the future? And even if you say it is in fact destructive, do we say that when one does a destructive act, we follow the law like Rabbi Yehuda, or halakha Rabbi Shimon? Within that, do we follow Rabbi Shimon who says it will be permitted? Okay, so you see why we had to ask this, because there's all kinds of permutations, and it may make a difference on a particular case which way we follow follow. Maybe depend on a person's intention or the exact biology. And so that's why we have these complex set of questions, which are very valuable also for learning in general how the laws of Shabbat work. And we'll have to wait till tomorrow to see the answer. Baruch Adonai L'olam, Amen v'Amen.